We look and we talk about the issue of whistleblowers, and I mean, we can't obviously, jump the gun on as to say Babita Deokaran and what has happened with this story. The reality is that, she was a whistleblower. The circumstances surrounding her death certainly are looking quite suspicious. But, the safety of whistleblowers is certainly something that really comes to our attention, and it is a big worry at this point.
Very much so. So as you say, unfortunately in South Africa, we have so much experience as to the various motives that it could have been behind the shooting of Babita Deokaran. But I think what has become increasingly evident is that she tried to blow the whistle on corruption. We have the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation releasing communication yesterday about how she tried to come forward and how she tried to push back against corruption. We've got the Special Investigating Unit saying that she was a witness in various cases. We have people close to her saying this as well. She had integrity. She wanted to hold the line. And we see this repeatedly in South Africa, where we have such a fundamental endemic corruption problem, and that means we need good people. We need good people, loyal civil servants who have integrity, who are going to push back, who are going to expose corruption, who are going to go to the authorities, who are going to cooperate. But when you see a case like this, where Babita Deokaran is shot dead ostensibly because she tried to blow the whistle, we don't know that for sure, but it certainly looks that way. Yeah. That is a deterrent. And that's why we cannot allow this to happen. And unfortunately, it happens far more often than it should in South Africa.
And this is the reality, because, I mean, you know what? If I'm sitting here at work and I suddenly see all of these things playing out in front of me, and I see so much blatant corruption, but then I read about what happens to somebody like Babita and so many before her, because, this is not an isolated incident, and I'll get to that in a short while with you as to how often this actually occurs. I mean, why should I step forward when my life, my risk? I mean, as we heard, she has a child that she dropped off at school, and now she is no longer. Why should I step forward when I actually have no protection?
And that's exactly the point, is we have to encourage South Africans to step forward. We cannot allow this to be a deterrent, because there is no way we can fight corruption in South Africa without whistleblowers coming forward. So what is quite promising is that Corruption Watch released a report last week called South Africa Needs Clean Hands. And in it said that they had received more than 33,000 whistleblower reports between 2012 and 2020. And of these, 5,000 of those came from within local government. The only way that we can deal with corruption in South Africa is if whistleblowers come forward. We need an insider account. We need somebody to be able to testify. So we have to encourage whistleblowers to come forward. And we've heard from the president at the Zondo Commission a couple of weeks ago. We've heard from the acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo saying that whistleblowers played a key role in bringing down state capture. And that's why we need to encourage people to come forward. And my biggest concern always when it comes to these stories of whistleblowers that are shot dead or that are pushed to the fringes of society or treated as pariahs, who are unemployed, is that people will look at these stories and they won't come forward. So we have to change the way we treat whistleblowers. We've got to change the legislation. We have to make sure that they are rewarded. We have to make sure that they are protected. And that's why I always advocate for a whistleblower house, a Chapter 9 institution, somewhere where whistleblowers will be protected emotionally, legally, physically, with security. We have to change the way we treat whistleblowers in South Africa if we are going to deal with corruption.
Yeah, I'm reading an article. It's coming from the Sowetan this morning, and they're quoting Kaiser Kanyago, the SIU spokesperson, saying that Deokaran is one of 300, as we know, witnesses in the probe into the PPE Gauteng scandal. But here's what's interesting. He said they put witnesses under protection in instances where their lives have been placed in danger. She never mentioned anything, but also we shouldn't work on the assumption that the reason she was killed is because of this, i.e. the SIU investigation into PPE scandal. Again, this doesn't instill much hope, does it?
No, it doesn't. And this is one of the problems you see with whistleblowers in South Africa, is that there is no real protection for them. So if, let's say, she did feel threatened and she needed to go into the witness protection unit. So to go into the witness protection program essentially means giving up your life giving up your identity, changing everything as you know it. And that's just not practical. So Tabiso Zulu, who's a whistleblower in KwaZulu-Natal on political assassinations, actually had to go to court to force the police minister to give him protection. And then they put him into the witness protection program, which just didn't work. It's not practical. Why should a witness have to give up their entire identity and their life in order to testify in a case? So we need to change the way that we deal with witnesses, and often authorities just don't know how to do that. So we need to be able to offer them security. The difficulty then also for the SIU is, can they offer security to 300 witnesses? And if they didn't feel that there was any kind of legitimate threat to her. And that's why it's navigating this very difficult terrain that we need to find a way to do if we are going to expect people to come through.
How often is this happening? I know that you've actually just published, it actually just came through on my phone now, is an article for News 24 in terms of whistleblowing. I mean, you've written a book about this, so this is something that you've looked at a lot. But in terms of whistleblowers and basically their assassination, how often is this happening? And we perhaps don't even know about it.
It happens far more often than we realize. So according to a forthcoming report from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, which has just in the final stages of doing this report on targeted killings in Eastern and Southern Africa, they estimate that 1,822 cases were recorded in South Africa for the period between 2000 and 2020. But remember, this is probably a really conservative number because they only work on cases that are reported, so this is very likely an undercount. And of these, 858 occurred between 2015 and 2020. So that means that in the last 6 years of that data set, accounted for 47% of the total number of hits that the report found. Many of these come from the taxi industry, so the majority come from the taxi industry. But if you look at political hits, and this is something that this particular case would fall into because it targets individuals that hold political or administrative office, those contribute to around 21% of targeted killings. Which is just a crazy thought, right? To think that that's a number of people that are being killed in South Africa. These are targeted assassinations. But the numbers tell one story. What really hits home for people is when you see a face, when you hear a story of someone. And that's why I've been trying to tell the stories of people like Jimmy Moklala, who was killed in Bombela in 2009 for blowing the whistle on 2010 stadium corruption. And people like Moss Parkway in Rustenburg, who was a loyal ANC cadre. He handed over a dossier to the ANC about corruption, and a couple of days later he was shot and killed. In both of those cases, there's been no resolution, there's been no justice for the family. And that's why when a story like this happens, where Babita Deokaran is shot dead, you hope and you expect the authorities to find the people responsible, not just the hitmen, but the people who ordered it as well. Otherwise, we can't encourage whistleblowers to come forward. And I'm sure you, Leanne, don't really want that situation where whistleblowers are not encouraged to come forward because of these consequences. We have to make sure that they are rewarded and encouraged. And we have a societal revolution in how we treat whistleblowers as well, because these people are patriots. They are heroes. And we will never fight corruption if it's not for them.
Absolutely. Mandy, you got to go. I know you have another interview at 20 past. It's 21 past. Quickly, go. Thank you. Thanks so much for your time. An absolute pleasure speaking to Mandy Wiener. She, of course, is an author of The Whistleblowers, and she's talking to us about the safety and protection of witnesses and whistleblowers. I mean, just to give you an example, and Sakina, I know you're going to be doing sports news, so I'm going to hand it to you. But I mean, just to give you some background, and again, we must say that there is still the investigation going on into this of Ms. Deokaran, who was gunned down, on Monday in her driveway. But, the reality is that she was the individual who stopped making payments because she saw there were irregularities taking place, and she refused to do this. She then obviously was removed from this position, and, she spoke out, and she was helping the SIU with a number of cases about all of this. And now she is no longer. But like Mandy said, will we ever find out who did this? And in previous instances, you never ever do. And that's the problem.
And the unfortunate reality that is. However, having said that, what we shouldn't shy away from is that when we talk about people holding the line, when we talk about doing the right thing, that is doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
And you know at what cost it is going to come. But you will still do the right thing. We have too many people who claim too many easy victories in our society, who will tell us tall tales about what they are supposedly doing. Whereas the reality is, if you are honest, if you're sincere and genuine about fighting corruption, there are actual, physical, real things that you can do in real time to make a difference.
This is the thing. This is it. It's a very tough one. We'll follow this one very, very closely, and it is also up to us to keep following these stories, because it's easy to just ignore and forget about it. Not ignore, but forget about it and let it just, disappear. But if we keep it on the radar, and keep asking questions as to how this investigation's going and where they are at it, we need to keep someone like this, their legacy alive in terms of doing the right thing, but unfortunately losing their life at the same time.
Unfortunately, absolutely. Touched on the Thabiso Zulu story. Where is Thabiso Zulu? Maybe I'll give him a call after the show just to check on where he is. Why does someone have to go to court? And then you have that whole to and fro, back and forth, just in order to get the protection as a whistleblower, even after attempted assassinations. It's ridiculous.
It's
so
crazy.
how do you then, in good conscience, encourage people to actually become whistleblowers?
I know. All right, you got to do sports news.
I have to
I'm
do
a real time watcher this morning. I'm keeping an eye on the time. It's 24 minutes past